Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here to welcome to the video that we've all been waiting for. The 7-pip shadow spells in Wizard101. Shadow spells are definitely one of the most controversial elements of the entire game, in my opinion. They've already made 4-pip, they've already made 5-pip, and they've already made 6-pip shadow enhanced spells. So the only thing that KingStyle is going to do next is add 7-pip shadow pip spells. So I thought I would review some suggestions for 7-pip shadow spells, I thought I'd review some spell ideas for 7-pip shadow spells. So without further ado, a special thank you to Stars of the Spiral for giving me the idea. Thank you so much. Let's get right into it. We're gonna look at their suggestions and I'm gonna review them as a reviewer for one shadow spell in every single school. So let's get it, my dudes. Bam! The first spell, which is part of the School of Ice, is called Crystal Arrows. Now, I'm reviewing this because, first off, I think these spells are very well designed. Like, they look nice. I'm just saying. But anyways, basically, the way this works is that there are 10 arrows that are used randomly on whoever is in the arena. So it's basically, it attacks all enemies, and basically, it can randomly hit. Each arrow has a mind of its own, right? Each arrow does 150 damage, and there are 10 arrows, and they randomly hit anybody. And basically, after hitting, each arrow can either stun, or it can apply some random negative charm. So that could be like a weakness, or a mantle, or an infection, or dispel. But it maxes out on 2 effects on a person. So basically the idea is it can do basically 2 effects on a person, but it does 10 different hits. And I think it's a really cool idea. How does it compare to what we have available to us right now? Well, if for 5 pips, Abominable can do as much as it does. It's about, 1150 base. It makes sense that for another 2 pips, you add about 300, 400 damage as they are doing. My suggestion is to possibly, if it really is going to do 10 different hits, I think instead of 150, I'd bring it down to like 130. That's the only change that I would make. But all in all, I really like the idea of crystal arrows. I think it would be a really cool thing, especially because, even though it can technically stun, the chances of it stunning over an infection or a weakness or a mantle or dispel, that's very low. And since it can only do 2 things max to a person, I feel like it's actually pretty balanced. It gives something very offensive for Ice to do. And in my opinion, any spell that gives Ice an alternative to what it does right now, which is just Abominable spam, because it does give it the ability to do more damage, is a good thing in my book. I think it would add diversity so you can have a defensive Ice and an offensive Ice setup depending on what kind of fighter you really are in PvP. So I know it seems very overpowered, but for that reason, I actually think this is a better spicy design. I give it 9 arrows out of 10. Now, the next spell that we are looking into is Bayom. Now, it's called Iron Sultan, which I think is actually, this man's psychic. These are ideas from 2016. So, clearly, KingStyle looked at it and they were like, alright, let's just make a 4-pip shadow spell called Iron Sultan. But actually, though, if it were to be a 7-pip shadow spell, let's focus on what it actually does. So, first, puts up a bubble. Then, it does 1377 damage to body, and then it does minus 25 or a range of minus 25 to minus 65 accuracy debuff. Now, what I really like about it is that it's very, I don't even know if I have this card. I don't actually have it, but it's very similar to the 8-pip storm spell that basically is just an Ifrit. A Storm Ifrit that does a ton of damage and does a minus 65 accuracy debuff. What I really like about it is that compared to Glowbugs, it does more, right? It does much more than 1120. It does 1377 for the extra 2 pips. I also think what I really like about it is that the damage buff, like the bubble that you have before it, not only is it great for a bubble change, it would also counteract other schools that use shadow spells to bubble change like balance. And it actually means it does more than 1377 base, which makes a lot of sense to me. It really depends on your damage, how much it actually ends up doing. So if you have a lot more damage, you can actually make it do a lot more than 1377. Just like Queen Calypso. Queen Calypso does exponentially more based on your damage. So I like that mechanic a lot. And the accuracy debuff is a lot better than the Enfeeble. All in all, I think it's a really, really good idea. But if you were to have the bubble, I think the damage would have to go from like 1400 to about 1250. And I know it seems like a much, much smaller thing compared to Glowbugs, but trust me, if it puts a bubble first, depending on how much damage you have, it can do an astronomical amount. So it would be very, very risky to make it very, very powerful without the bubble itself. But that's what I think. Let me know what you guys think about Iron Sultan. My personal opinion on this spell design, I'd give it 7 Sultans out of 10. I think that the accuracy debuff isn't really what we need right now for a Storm. I think, honestly, if we were to have a Storm spell, I think an Overtime would be a really, really great idea. But that's just me. I want a combo with Overtimes, powerful Overtimes on my Storm. And right now, Storm really doesn't have that. So that's my opinion. Let's go on to the next one, my man. Biome. As you guys can see, the next spell is an absolute bop, alright? The spell is called Desert Lion, which, by the way, again, I'm just saying, the graphics on this look crispy. I'm sorry, whoever designed these, oh my god. I'm just saying, anyways, I really like the spell. Basically, what it does is a single targeting hit, it seems like, from what I can tell. It seems like, you know, seems like a very, very, targeting, single target hit. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I'm sorry. Anyways, does 1395 damage, and it also does plus 200 flat damage to your next hit, and what I really, really like, minus 500 flat damage to your opponent's hit. So it's a lot like a free, except instead of minus 90%, it's minus 500 flat. Now, I don't know if y'all realize how much flat resist can actually do, but let's say you actually have base flat resist to begin with, like this wizard has. Adding another 500 could potentially reduce it down to like 600 damage no matter what they do. So basically subtracting 600 damage from a hit when it hits you, it can easily save your life. How many times have you clutched by over 600 health? I assume it's a lot. I genuinely believe that this would be a really, really cool mechanic. Also, adding 200 flat damage is also a very, very cool thing. My personal opinion, I think if you're going to go with flat damage, it should be doing more flat damage offensively and more flat damage defensively. If it is really going to be 7 pips and a shadow pip. It's just really exciting because I've never really seen a spell idea that works in flat damage like this. And I definitely think it would make for something that's not that overpowered, in my opinion. Because technically, you could use something like a Fire Elf that does 0 damage. You know, like, it just, like, does 0 damage. You just get rid of it. You know, it's not really the end of the world. Unlike, you know, minus 90. You know, but, like, you can hit through a flat damage weakness. You can't really hit through a minus 90 weakness. So for that reason and that reason only, I think the flat damage should be way, way up. To the point where it literally becomes, like, an absorb. You know, it should be like an absorb. I think since life already has an absorb that's way more than 500, why shouldn't fire have something, you know? That being said, I do think it's very, very interesting because unlike an absorb, since it's going onto the target, it's like a weakness. It's like a flat damage weakness. So I'm not really sure how the mechanics would work on that. Maybe instead of an absorb, which goes at the end of an attack, if it happens at the beginning of an attack, then that could be like a reverse enchant almost, you know? If that's the case, then I wouldn't make any changes. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt, and I'm assuming it's like a weakness that happens before all the buffs are added to it. In that case, this is a great mechanic. The damage seems to be pretty balanced. I mean, FFA is already like, you know, does about 1300. So 1395 doesn't really seem like a huge buff, but if the flat damage is what I think it is, I give this a perfect 10 out of 10 Desert Lions, my mans. I really, really think this would be a really cool idea. But tell me what you guys think in the comments below. Let's go to the next wizard. My mans. This spell had me going like, oh my god. You know, so basically, if you guys can see, Biome, Magic Hour, as this lovely person who designed this calls it. Very, very cool. Does 250 damage, then has an overtime for a huge 1350 damage hit, and during each round of the damage overtime, it can apply a random dispel, which includes star, sun, moon, and shadow. I think that's really cool. I really think that's really, really cool. There's nothing really more to be said about it. It reminds me of the Judgment card that can do a random dispel, and I've always thought it was a really good idea. It brings an overtime into Balance's, artillery. I think that it's a really, really good idea. I honestly think the damage is a little bit high. That's just my personal opinion, I guess. But if Gaze of Fate only does 1100 damage with a bubble, I just don't see why a balance hit should be doing 1600, even if it is an overtime, even if it can be triaged or shifted. I mean, I know that's catastrophic because that's a lot of pips lost. I just think that's doing way too much. But the dispel idea is what I really like. So I recommend on this spell reducing the damage to like maybe 100 on the first hit, and then maybe the overtime can do about 1300. So basically you do 1400. I don't see that as a huge difference in, in terms of like leveling up the damage. I really do think that keeping a DOT is a really good idea, damage overtime, really good idea for balance, and keeping random dispels is a brilliant idea, and therefore I give this, if not for the damage, I would give this, a perfect score, because the damage is catastrophically high. I don't know what they doing with this one. I've got to give this 8 clock looking things out of 8 clock looking things. Let's go to the next one right now, my man. This is one of my favorite spells on this list, and I'll tell you why. Because once again, it takes advantage of mechanics that we have yet to see in this game, and honestly, it just makes sense. It honestly just makes sense to me. So basically what it does, right, does 1271 death damage to all enemies, and it reduces the target's maximum health to 85%. But you can't do it more than once. So basically what that means is if you have like 5,000 health, you end up with like 4,250 health as your maximum. Now, here's what I think about this. Since it's a damage to all enemies, I think it does a little bit too much. What I would modify with this spell, in my opinion, is basically make it do a little bit more than Winged Sorrow. So as you guys can see, my man's, the Winged Sorrow, it does 1030 max, but the range is a huge thing. It's a really big issue when you're using this. I don't think a lot of people realize this. 850 to 1030 is a huge, huge range. It could really, really vary how much you actually do. So I think it should do about 1271 to a single person. It shouldn't do it to all. I really don't see it doing it to all, because another thing about this is that it would reduce everyone's max health to 85%. I think it should be a single hit, but the max health should be reduced to 80% instead of 85%. Just because, I think it would be a really, really cool idea. Especially, because, I think that it makes sense. If you really think about it, right? If you really think about it, it only makes sense against schools that heal. Otherwise, it's honestly not that good of a spell. That's why it should be that overpowered. I think it could do, a lot of base, and if that's the only added mechanic, then it's good. Because if you really think about it, if it's doing, 1,300 damage and you enchant it, that's already doing 1,500 damage, right? So if you have an open shot on an Ice Wizard, even an Ice Wizard, right? You're already going to do more damage than 20% of their health. I really don't think they're going to tank it by more than that. So reducing their max health down doesn't really do much, because an Ice isn't going to heal it back. So really the schools that make sense against are maybe Balance and Life and other Death Wizards, because those can heal back. So because of that little handicap, I actually don't think there's an overpowered spell at all, and I think the damage should be single hit, and it could be a little bit more. That's my humble opinion. I really think that because Winged Sorrow does about 1030 for one more pip, I don't see why it shouldn't be able to do 1300, and that's pretty much what it does. I don't think it should be attacking all enemies. I really don't. I think that's a huge, huge increase in power. I think that's just unnecessary. If it's hitting all enemies, it's weaker, right? So if it's really hitting one person, could do 1300, 1350, and it could have a really cool mechanic. I really like the concept of this. I give this one 9 out of 10 deaths. But the one thing I want to be careful about is that I just think that, because it can only apply once, I think 85% is not going to do much. Maybe it could be 80%. Maybe it could be 75%. I don't really know. This is a very, very iffy thing. I just think it'd be a really good counter to people who heal spam a lot. And we don't really have that in the game right now. That's why I'm really excited about this. Let me know what you guys think about this spell. Are there any other additions you'd make to it? This is a very interesting one, so I want to hear opinions about it. Let's go to the next one, my man's. Life. All right, Life is one of the most overpowered schools at the moment. All right, they already have a really, really great, hit all, which is a Yamasu, which they needed for a long time. They already have an amazing, this is one of the best. Like, if not for Abominable, this would be the best. Single hit. So, I think it makes, I think they really didn't get a good spell with the Wings of Fate, in my opinion. It really doesn't do that much at all, and I get that the healing is great, but, you know, I don't really think that they should have done this. I really think if they're going to make a healing spell, just make a healing spell, which is why I really like the next idea. I think Life has always been a healing school. It should get a really good heal, you know? One big thing about this, I really don't think this should be in PvP. I do think this is a really good idea because I think Life deserves a shadow hit that does healing, you know, or shadow spell that does healing. So basically how this one works, it's the opposite of the death one. So for 4 rounds, your allies all get 20% more maximum health, and it's a 1275 heal to everybody. As far as heals go, I think since Rebirth does about 650, I think it should be down to like 1,000. Then again, if it's not in PvP, I really don't mind that much at all. I think it would be a little bit broken if it did 1,300, because if you put a Primordial on it, you're talking like 1,400 something, you know, heal back. So I don't really think that's such a good idea. What I do think, however, is that if you were to use this, right, if you wanted to make it a PvP thing, you could drastically reduce the healing and also make the bonus health maybe 15%, and it would actually be viable even in PvP. It would be a good counter to Death Spell if they made it a thing. It would be really interesting to see, and you could probably use it like a Satyr. You could cast it on yourself. You could maybe cast it on a minion if you really want to. Once again, I think that it should be a permanent change, but it should be a one-time use. That's my humble opinion on this one. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let's get to the next and last one. Finally, we are doing Myth, my mans. Myth, this spell, Bayom, it's called the Lens of Truth. What I really like about the Lens of Truth is that it brings Myth back to its roots. I'll stop. But basically, the way it works is it does 386 damage, and then it does 1096 damage. If it sounds familiar, it's a lot like Orthrus. I really like just the concept of an Orthrus with a Shadow Pip attached. It does more. What I really I think is cool is that it also does a minus 45% to all your blades and the shields you have on at the moment. Now, it's already a double hit, so I don't really see this working for the shields that much. I mean, I don't know why you would use this if you didn't have, if the opponent already had more than one shield. I don't know, maybe you were just going to do it if they're like seriously spam shielding and you don't want to shatter for some reason because, you know, you're a Myth. But I really like how it basically, it's basically also uses like, you know, Earthquake's tendencies to remove blades and shields. Basically, it's just like, it's removing your offenses and defenses as much as possible. I really like that. If you're going against a blade stacker and you don't want to use an Efreet because of whatever reason, maybe, not Efreet, an Earthquake for whatever reason, you know, maybe it's because, you know, you have traps that you want to save. Maybe, you know, you have blades and you want to get rid of their blades, but like your blades are important, you know, like why would you use it all on an Earthquake? This is a spell for you. I really like it. Damage comparison, I really like how it's actually very balanced. I think Baba Yaga does so little because it summons a very useful minion. I think it's totally okay for it to do a little bit over 1,400 damage. It really does make sense. It's pretty much all that it does, you know? I mean, it does reduce your offenses, but for that round, that's all that it does. You know, it doesn't do anything else. So for that reason, I think it makes more than enough sense. I love the mechanic. I really think it, like, speaks to the Myth School a lot. For that, I give it 10 hieroglyphic Ankh joint looking ass out of 10 hieroglyphic Ankh joint looking ass. Alright, guys, let me know what you thought of all of these spells in the comments below. I love to read your opinions, your comments. I thought this was a really fun idea. Once again, Stars of the Spiral. All of these spells were created on that fan site. I'll obviously link it below. If I don't, remind me, host, please. Yeah, I just want your opinions. It's a lot of fun. If somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Drop a like if you enjoyed and leave us up if you're new, and stay awesome, bruh. And yeah,